Hey, Lead Up Podcast listeners, really excited to have you join us today. If you're listening to the recording or you're watching on YouTube, I've got a special guest with me today, Michael Korpiel. Michael is a former hospital healthcare executive, recently retired and starting kind of the next phase of his life from that journey. I've known Michael off and on for really about 20 years. I met Michael when I started Harbour Resources. Michael, I started as a headhunting firm recruiting healthcare executives, and you and I did some work together when you were with Methodist down in Dallas, Texas. And just kind of stayed in touch through, the LinkedIn social media app that we can all do that with today. And we recently reconnected. Michael is now teaching in the healthcare administration space, helping the next generation leaders prepare themselves for what's to come in this industry. Michael, welcome to the Lead Up Podcast. So great to have you here.
Michael, thank you so much for having me. I'm very honored that you asked me to be a part of this. It's been a great relationship and keeping in touch with you and just learning from you and everything that you have done for leadership over the years. It's been wonderful to be connected with you. So thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, we're really excited. You're going to share with our audience today and really add value to them. You've got a lot of experience. And, I know you've seen and done a lot of things in the healthcare leadership space. You've seen changes. You survived the pandemic like the rest of us that are still here, leading in this space. And so what I want to do is just have a discussion around leadership, the importance of values-based leadership, why it's so important, maybe even more so today than it's ever been. But before we do that, let's just take our listeners on a little bit of a journey. Talk to us about kind of how you started and what that journey looked like a little bit to where you're at now.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Um, I've had a little bit of a crooked road in my past. I'm currently in Sacramento, California, and have been here for the last 8 years. But I got my bachelor's degree in education, and that really was the foundation for what I wanted to do in the future, even in healthcare administration, because teaching is a really important part of administration and leadership going forward. And so that was a good foundation for me. But um, as I was teaching, I got interested in healthcare. My wife wanted me to do something a little bit different. And so I got my master's in healthcare administration from Texas Women's University in Dallas and Denton, Texas. I started my career at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, Texas, which is a large public hospital in Dallas County, serving primarily poor. But what I was most grateful for is the leadership that I had at the time with Dr. Ron Anderson, who was the CEO, and McGregor Day, who was the chief operating officer, to be a part of an academic medical center and to get that foundation around really two things, which is the importance of public health in our healthcare system, especially today, as we've talked about as we talk about what's going on nationally with public health. But the importance of public health is so important, and I got a good foundation there. But really focusing on the patient and patient-centered care was a really good start for me as a young administrative fellow and as an executive. I stayed there for 15 years. Then I moved over to Methodist Health System in Dallas to learn more about the private sector and understand the dynamics around a non-academic medical center and a private medical staff, which was a wonderful experience. Then my goal then was to get back into academic medicine. I went to the University of Mississippi Medical Center as the chief operating officer. I was there for 3 years. And then spent some time in the Ascension system when Ascension was in Birmingham under St. Vincent's Health System. I was there for 3 or 4 years. And then I left there and finished my doctorate degree, which I started while I was at the University of Mississippi. And that I got that degree primarily with the intention of teaching. I wanted to get back into education after I retired. I was 55-ish at the time, and so it was a good time for me to get that degree, and it was being offered early at the University of Mississippi. And so I completed that, um, and then I did something that I never really did, and it goes back to your foundational work. My goal is as I started to look for my next job, and I was 57 years old, I was really picky as to what I wanted to do, and recognizing that having a boss that I could work with, and having a boss that um, was supported was paramount for me. I really looked around the country for the right opportunity. Mhm. And I decided to take an interim role in California, in Sacramento, at Mercy San Juan Medical Center, part of Dignity Health, which is now Common Spirit Health. Um, that that engagement alone did more for my career than anything else that I've ever done my career. Being an interim leader is not being like a permanent leader. I was able to do things and get things done that I had not been able to do as a permanent leader. So it's a real growing experience for me. And but after 7 months, Dignity Health offered me a position, a permanent position in that role, and I took it and moved my wife and I. Fortunately, she came with me all the way to California, and have been at Indignity Health, Common Spirit Health for 8 years. Recently retired from that position. Um, and because I wanted to get into teaching, and which is where I am right now at Chesapeake University and in Sacramento, starting up and doing an online Masters of Healthcare Administration program for working executives, working managers who want to advance their career. So that's a long explanation of my career, but it's had a lot of twists and turns along the way.
Yeah, and have seen a lot. I'm interested to dig in a little bit. You said you were able to do things as an interim that you weren't able to do as a permanent. Talk about that a little bit. What do you mean by that and that experience? What's the difference in those two?
Yeah, it was great. I was a little hesitant because I had never done interim work before. Um, but whenever you come into an interim role, it's usually because things are not going well in the organization.
Mhm.
And I had a very good boss at the time who brought me in as an interim, and Lori Harding was her name, and she said, "Look, this is what I want you to focus on." And she gave me three things, very outlined three things that I needed to focus on: employee engagement, patient experience, and improving productivity.
Mm.
It wasn't about the bottom line. The system was doing well financially, but this hospital in particular was not. And so I spent my time having to do things and to implement things where in the past there may have been a little bit of or when I was in a permanent role, that I would take much more of a long-term view on the things that I was trying to implement and the things that I tried to do. Um, I had a much more personal connection with the people of the organization. But I realized that in an interim role, I didn't have any of those things. I was given a task of three things as an interim. I do it and get it done and move on. And so I went about, and I was not the only interim at the time. They actually replaced the chief nursing executive at the same day that I was replaced. I came on, and so it was the two of us came on, and um, we we both. It was the first time of interim leadership for both of us. And what was interesting is we automatically went into this permanent role mentality of looking at long-term solutions to problems that we were tasked to do. And we both took a step back and said, well, wait a minute, that's not what we're here for. We are here for quick turnaround type decisions and action and plans in order to get this on track so that when our work is done, they will bring on into the permanent roles and take it there, and we will set the stage for success in the future for them. And so I'll never forget it. The second day that I was there, I sat down with the chief operating officer of the company and said, I need for you to eliminate 120 employees within the next 6 weeks.
Mm.
And so when you have a mentality of a long-term view and a personal connection with people sometimes, that oftentimes can get in the way of what you're trying to accomplish. Um, but I didn't do that. I didn't have those connections, but I sat down with the chief operating or the chief financial officer who had a really strong plan in place, but was never really given the permission by the previous CEO to execute. And I remember sitting down with him and him going over the plan and I'm saying, Robin, this is a great plan and let's do it. And he just looked at me and said, really? And I went, yeah, really. What's the problem? He said, well, we never had anybody who gave us permission to do that anymore.
Hmm.
And it was a real eye opener for me to say, as a leader, as a CEO, I don't have to necessarily get the work done. I just have to give permission to people who are passionate about what to do, who know what to do, and they just want to get the permission to be able to move forward. And within the next 4 to 6 weeks, we were able to eliminate 115 positions and not have to lay off one person, which was a high priority for both of them. So it was really successful, but it took a step back for me as a leader to say, maybe as I move forward and I look at decisions that I have to make, I maybe need to take a little bit of an approach of an interim leader in order to get things done quickly. That was a really good experience for me.
So I guess it's safe to say then your leadership over the last 8 years shifted compared to maybe the first 25 years of your career in the way that you.
Well, it gave me a skill set that I really didn't have before. And so, yes, it did shift. And what I was able to do, recognizing that I did get hired as the full-time person in that role, that I shifted my mentality to a much more long-term view, but had a much more focused desire on implementing decisions, on implementing plans from a short-term view that that were much more effective. And so I integrated the two. I took the time to take an opportunity to meet with people who may have been affected by layoffs or who may have been affected by change, to make that connection with them, but also explain in a much more broad and much more detailed way why these things were happening and why this was good, not only for the company, but for you as an individual and for us as a leadership group. And so it really kind of drove me to be more focusful and deliberate around communication and the decisions that I was making with regard to changes in the organization.
Yeah, that's good. Most organizations spend their time creating these strategic plans that are looking out 5 years, maybe even more, right? But you remind me of a quote, Michael, that I've often heard and try to, even apply in my own life is we often overestimate what we can do in 1 year, but we underestimate what we can do in 5 years. And, it's a great example of what you're talking about. Hospitals they notoriously plan for 5 years out. I don't think we can do that anymore with all the crazy changes that happen, right? But what happens a lot of times, and there's a lot of neuroscience behind this, when we give 5 years to do something that could really be done in 2 years, we delay progress. And, I think what you experienced is we can make long-term decisions, but speed up implementation and get there much quicker. And so it's interesting that you were kind of forced to do that in an interim role, but it shifted your style and your communication a little bit once you were named permanent. So how did that impact your leadership over those last 8 years and getting things done?
That's a great observation, Michael. And that's exactly what happened is that we oftentimes overthink or overplan or overanalyze changes that we make, and it oftentimes takes longer than it needs to take.
Hmm.
And so, as as we move forward in our planning for the year, it was clear that we could do things a lot quicker. Now, Common Spirit Health is a very large organization, the largest not-for-profit healthcare organization, and in any organization that is that large, there are inherent bureaucracies that you have to go through. However, we brought that down to the hospital level to really begin to make changes really quickly. And the impact of that from a leadership perspective was tremendous.
Mm.
Physicians who work in our organizations saw that change happening. Staff who had been unengaged, disengaged prior to me getting there saw that things were happening. And they realized that some of them were probably the best things that for them, but they knew that something was happening, and that energy and that work really created a opportunity for more engagement and excitement in the organization. And it changed the culture. And I remember someone coming in who had been in the organization a long time, who worked at corporate, who came in about a month and a half after I started. And he said, "This is a completely different organization. I can feel the culture. I can feel the change. I can feel the energy." And it was palpable. And so it's that type of thing to accelerate decisions, to move things along, to just give people permission to do the things they love to do.
Mm.
Oftentimes leaders want to be the person who makes all the decisions or have all the answers, um, or wants to be recognized for the things that are being done. I realized in these past 8 years, especially during COVID, that my job wasn't necessarily getting things done, but my job was to get the right people in the right seats on the bus
Mm.
and allow them and force them to work together, get them to work together as a collaborative team, and create that um, that culture of working together as a leadership group and as a management group to make that change. And so I wasn't so focused on necessarily, not at all, taking the credit, but actually bringing people together, managing the people so that we can get things done. And when you give them that opportunity to do that, they love what they do, and they get things done not only a lot quicker than I can do it myself, normally a lot better than I can do it myself.
Yeah, like that's so important. It's what I try to teach today, right? You and I are similar generationally Gen Xers. Lots of kind of command and control. I'm the leader. We make decisions. We go do it. Not a, but over and in healthcare, I think it's an industry that has to do it better. Lots of collaboration. There's a lot of moving parts, right? And interdepartmental teams. So some of it comes natural to collaborate with others, but not always. How did you make that shift from I'm the leader, I got to make all the decisions to I'm the leader, I got to get the right people in the room and let them make the right decisions to move forward? Talk about that transition in your leadership as you grew over the years.
Sure. Yeah, let me go back a little bit. As a part of my growth and my development as a leader, and in my journey, I actually, after I graduated from college, I actually joined the monastery. I am Catholic, and I joined the monastery, and I became a monk for a couple of years.
Hmm.
Left that and then eventually got married and had 2 kids and 5 grandkids. But that whole process, one of the things that I learned is the philosophy, the management philosophy of servant leadership. And that's the course that I teach today.
Mm.
And if it's one thing that I really am concerned about healthcare today, which is a service oriented organization, we are built to serve people. Um, so many leaders don't understand what servant leadership is all about. And so for me, um, it's a basic core value for me in that philosophy to be a servant leader. I recognize that by going into an organization and making sure that the people who do the work have the things they need, have the environment that is conducive to being productive, and by serving them that way, I know that I can get the best results for my organization. And so, servant leadership for me is a philosophy that I have adopted over the years that has served me well. And I would like to see, and that's the reason I got into teaching, because I believe that if we are to be successful in the future in healthcare and to have a strong healthcare organization, we need more and more leaders to have a servant leader mentality because we are a service oriented industry. Focus, especially recently, on the so much focus on power and bullying and money, really, uh, really concerns me as an industry. Unfortunately, I have had leaders in most of my career who have recognized that if you focus on quality, if you focus on patient satisfaction, if you focus on um, employee engagement, the money is going to follow. And in my case, it just about always has. There's been some up downs and downtows, but for the most part, the organizations that I had been with have been successful because we focused on quality, service, and employee engagement, physician engagement as well.
Yeah, I'm such a believer in that. If you can get that true north right. I often use, the fast food industry as an example of that. Chick-fil-A is known for their values-based leadership and how they treat their employees. They're the they gross more money than any of the there's only 2 other fast food chains that gross more money than they do, but Chick-fil-A's closed on weekends, closed on Sundays, and they just print money, right? And they sell chicken, and I'm like, "Well, if they can do that selling chicken, why can't we do that in healthcare? Like, how do we get it right in healthcare?" And I believe it's about what you just said, focus on our people. When we take care of our people, and look, Chick-fil-A is known for thousands of people applying for one open position. People want to go work there. And, I wrote a book called Quit Losing Talent. It's all about developing a stay culture. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. It's all about creating this place where people want to stay, right? And if we get the culture right, people will wanna stay with us, and people wanna come join us too. Our recruiting job gets easier as well. But talk about that for a minute. You brought up culture. Why is culture so important, and why is it so important that the CEO drive that culture and how it has a ripple effect throughout the organization? Because I see some senior leaders team, well, that's an HR thing. Culture is an HR thing. So talk about that a minute.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I didn't really fully understand it when I was early on in my career because I was really kind of task oriented and wanted to make a name for myself and wanted to grow in the organization.
Sure.
I really didn't understand a couple of things. But as I moved on in my career, as I read more, as I did things like read your book, Quit Losing Talent, I recognize that there are a couple of things in an organization that are key to success. And one is that an organization has to have a very strong mission. mission statement. Um, and I have been involved in organizations that have had mission statements that were really well written and really elaborate and wow, inspirational, but they didn't live them. And um, and they had values that had outlined that uh, that they did not live. They had them posted all over the hospital and posted in different areas, but they didn't live them. And they struggled. And I realized as time went on, and especially as I got to Common Spirit Health and Dignity Health, how important that mission statement really is, and how important it is for the leadership of the organization to make sure that we are making decisions, that we are acting in the way, that we are treating people that is consistent with the missions and values of the organization. We ask employees all the time to know the mission statement and know the values, but if you don't practice them, if you don't live them from an organization standpoint, then they become hollow and the direction becomes wrong. I mentioned that when I got my doctorate degree and later in career, I was very picky about the organization that I wanted to work for. And one of those things that I was very picky about was I wanted to work in an organization that, in which the leadership of the organization, even at the very top, lived and followed the mission and the vision statement. So focusing on that mission and vision, and I see you have vision, I see you have vision, mission, purpose behind you in the words that are on your little background there. Lloyd Dean, who was the CEO at Dignity Health when I came on board, Marvin Quinn, who was the COO when I came on board. Those are two people, as well as the rest of the leadership team, that really lived the vision, and that created a foundation for me as I went through the organization to say every decision that we make is going to be consistent with our values. It's going to be consistent with our mission. And if it's not, then we shouldn't be doing it. And we decided not to do some things because it was not consistent with our mission and our values. And so that's really the foundation. What I also learned is that I needed to develop my own mission statement and my own value statement as a leader. I needed to know who I was. And obviously that needs to be consistent with any organization that I work with. But I spent months, I worked with a leadership coach, and I worked months on developing and writing a leadership mission statement for myself and the 5 key values that I had for myself as well. And when I did that, it set the stage for me to say, now every day when I go into work and even when I'm out of work, because as you know, employees see you outside of work and they judge you based off of your behaviors. My whole life was really kind of geared around that mission statement and the values that were near and dear to me. And so that allowed me to act in a way as a leader that was consistent from day to day, um, and and consistent with the organization. With that, I was then able to create and pass that on to my leadership team to create that same expectation. And we spent multiple sessions with my leadership team when I got to the new organization, developing our own leadership principles, our guiding principles for our leadership team. And we used a consultant to help us do that and write out 6 or 7 guiding principles that we were going to live by as an executive team. And once we went through that exercise, it really created the foundation for how we were going to focus as a leadership team and how we were going to go about working and driving the culture of the organization. Because and I'm sure you've worked with organizations, there are a lot of informal leaders in an organization. And if those informal leaders don't want to do what needs to be done, they will destroy any strategy that you're trying to put into place. Uh, Creating that culture is what's necessary in order to be successful operationally and strategically.
Yeah, a huge believer in what you just shared. The first chapter in my book is target check your values, right? Getting the values right as an individual. I love that because I think that's so important. I need to know what I stand for as a leader, how I'm going to show up in that. And two, organizationally, what we stand for, how we're going to show up in that as well.
I've learned a lot from you over the years, Mike.
Well, thank you for that. But yeah, I mean, it's so vital, right? But it also, those are guiding, as you said, guiding principles. Healthcare faces a tremendous amount of pressure from the inside and from the outside. How does a leader stay anchored to those values under immense operational pressure, right? There's shortages in staff and physician and nurses today. There's shortages of resources from reimbursements, all of those things. How do you teach others and lead others to stay anchored to those values under those tremendous pressures we face today?
Sure, it's a great question. You got lots of good questions. I know you have read some books on Stoicism, as have I. We have been consistent with that, and there's a book that I read every morning about the daily Stoic. And the reading today was about habits and how important habits are, but how habits also can be a barrier to growth and a barrier to development of an individual. And I projected out to an organization as I communicated with my son about this. It's really important that in an organization as a leader, you don't become stagnant.
Mm.
You always look for something new. You always try something new. You're always looking for the latest innovation. And in today's healthcare world, oftentimes that involves money, which is really difficult, especially for some not-for-profit organization. Um, uh, but there has to be a desire and an overarching um, uh, attitude that we are going to be efficient, but we're going to try new things. And so one of the things that I did when I came to this new organization is I hired someone who was an expert in lean processing and um, Six Sigma. And we identified with my leadership team 4 or 5 different areas of the hospital where we knew we were struggling operationally. And we deployed a team and got people educated in lean processing, and then educated in methodologies of lean processing. And we went about going through and changing and doing new things so that we could keep people going. It's really funny how change happens. And I think you probably know this, Mike. Um, People are always very resistant to change. I've never gotten into an organization or a situation where people said, I want change. I want to change my workplace. And so they're very resistant to change. But one of the things that I found out is that if you involve people in the process of making the change and improving the change processes in the hospital, and implementing them, they then become very committed to making sure that that change is successful. The difficult part comes after you've implemented that change, when you need to make the next set of changes to make the next improvement. They then get so committed to the change that they just made that they don't want to make a change again. And to create a learning environment with all of the employees in order to be willing to try new things, to try new innovation, to take a next step, to push the envelope a little bit forward, um, prevents you as a leader from becoming stagnant, prevents you as an organization to become stagnant. So we did things like had innovative groups, or we had young physicians who were new to the organization come in and meet with them on a regular basis so that we could hear what's happening in other systems that they were in. What are they doing that we would like to do? Brought in physicians who worked in other hospitals to say, what do they do over there that you feel we need to do here? And so involving people, encouraging people to come forward with new ideas helps to create a mechanism for change and improvement and innovation in the organization.
So good. We could go a lot of different directions. I love that you brought up habits, right? Because that's what we do at Harbour Resources is we feel like we're in the habit and behavior change business. Yes, we deliver leadership training, but we partner with our clients to track habits and behavior change over time that impact those bottom line or those KPIs that you're measuring after the fact. And one of the things when you talk about change, I learned this from Quint Studer, the 3 stages of change. There's defiance, first of all. Everybody's going to defy change because I don't want to change. I'm comfortable. It's working. So they kind of defy it at first and they become compliant eventually. If, as a leader, a lot of leaders do this when there's defiance. They just say, well, Michael, he's not a team player. Well, that's not really true. Michael's just comfortable. And my job as a leader is to move Michael out of defiance, out of comfort into some compliance, right? Starting to do what we're asking him to do. But this is where leadership really happens, is moving from compliance to reliance. We got to stay engaged as a leader long enough to get people reliant on that change. And in my experience, Michael, what I see is leaders, they kind of stop right there and, okay, Michael's got it. And then Michael goes back to his old habits because we're creatures of habit, right? We didn't stay with it long enough to make sure we institutionalize that change and we become reliant on it. And healthcare is notorious for that. We go back to our old ways because it's just comfortable, right? Or, the other thing is, it's Jim Collins' good to great. A good habit can be dangerous. Good habits are good, but it could be one of the worst things for us because if it keeps us stuck, and prevents us from becoming great, that's the other thing is, and so I love this idea of becoming a learning organization and constantly evaluating, are we stuck in good when we could be great because we have a good habit that's preventing us from moving.
And how often do we get stuck? And
But
I have found that it's not only the employees, but also the physicians. Many physicians get stuck in the way of doing things. And of course, they're under a lot of pressure. They're oftentimes running their own business. They have their own agenda that they want to achieve, but they also want the best for their patients. And so having the opportunity to get a physician to get involved in the change is really a pleasure. And so to find those doctors and find those providers who are willing to put in the time to really kind of look at data, to take a look at change, to look at how this is going to improve things for them. It's all change is all about them. They want to know how it's going to affect me. Am I going to lose my job? Are we going to do this and I'm going to get, am I going to lose my job? Or is my job going to change? Or am I not going to be successful? And so really up front when you take that change, to make sure that there is a comfort level that they are going to be included in the process. They are going to be included in the change, and we are going to recognize you for helping to get to that point, and it's going to be a positive for them. We oftentimes forget about the personal connection and the personal opportunity we have to take our individual employees who are involved in things and say, I am interested in you. And Erie Chapman, I read the book, Radical Loving Care. Erie Chapman always says, you have to make sure that your employees know that you love them, and you have to take a personal interest in them to say, I want you to grow. I want you to get better. I want you to move on or move up or do something that you've never done. And once you have that trust that you have developed with the individual employees or with the physicians, um, then you can go on and accomplish a lot better things. But it's hard work. It's really hard work to do that.
So good. Got to tune in as a leader to WII3, right? FM. What is in it for me? That's kind of
Right.
what's not what's it because everybody's like, what's in it for me? I'm not going to change unless there's something in it for me. And so, again, we have to lead from that place. Michael, we're gonna again, time flies when you're having great conversation. I want to land the plane with one last question for you. Because look, you and I are that age that at some point we're going to need healthcare. I hope it's a lot further down the road for both of us. But what would you say to the next generation if you were stepping into a CEO role now? What would be different? What would you do different than when you stepped into leadership 25 years ago? What advice would you give to that next generation of healthcare leaders, CEO in the hospital arena that just from your experience that you think they need to know today?
Well, something really simple. I had a boss one time who told me that I expect all of my hospital presidents, if they need healthcare, that they're going to get it in the hospital that they are the president of.
Mm.
And it was really kind of funny because the first time he needed surgery, he went outside of the system and didn't get a surgery.
Oh, wow.
And I called him on it, and he said, yeah, you're right. But I had surgery, and I retired in July, but I had surgery on Monday, and my first choice was to go back to the hospital that I was the CEO at.
Mm.
Why did I do that? Because I knew that I built an organization that was safe, that was patient friendly, that was patient centered, and that people care about having success. And so I think the first step as a new leader going into an organization is to build an organization that you are so comfortable with, that you are so trustworthy in, that you and your family would get their health care at the organization that you are leading. Now, I know there's privacy things and people concerned about privacy and they don't want to know all those different things. That never bothered me individually. It actually was reassuring for me that I was building an organization that I felt comfortable getting my care in. But I would, in addition to that, I just go back to what I said before. We have to take an approach in leadership in order to get to uh, the service-oriented structure that we are built around as an industry. To take the time to get to know the people in the organization that work for you, day shift, night shift, weekend shift, people who work in the corporate offices, people who support you as a hospital, as an organization, in the business office, in the accounting office. Get to know as many people as you possibly can within the organization. If you want to create disunity in the organization, then stay in your office, answer your emails, answer your phone, and don't let anybody see you. That is a recipe for failure, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so it's hard work. And fortunately, I had a wife who knew that. And she recognized that my job was a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job. It was something, and my kids knew that too. My kids recognized that. And not that I was a workaholic, but I made sure that when my kids had things to do, I would attend them. But when there were things that had to happen on the weekends or at night, in the hospital, it was there for the staff, and I expected my staff to be there as well. And to create that culture of wanting to be available to do that, is really important. I'll tell you a quick story, Michael. I had a physician. I went into a new organization. I had a physician came into my office yelling and screaming because on the weekend and at night, you don't know what's going on here at Korpiel, and this goes on and this goes on and it doesn't happen. And I listened to him and I didn't argue with him. And I said, okay. So that weekend I came in at 12:30 at night to go into the emergency room to see what was going on. And it wasn't exactly how he described it to me, but I saw him. And the next Monday, I came in and I saw him and I said, hey, I came in on the weekend and I saw what you were talking about. Well, let me tell you what my impression was. And he stepped back and he said, you actually came in on the weekend? Came in 12:30? And I went, well, yeah, I did. Said there was a problem. I came in and looked at it. And he said, I wasn't expecting you to do that. And it put him in a place that now allowed us to speak at the same level without emotion in order to solve the problem and make it right. And so being willing to put in the time, being willing to get to know people is really important for leadership as you move forward, especially in an industry like we do in healthcare.
Yeah, love that. It's a great place to wrap up our conversation. I love what you said, and a question I always ask when I go in and start an engagement with a leadership team, I ask this question: would you bring your kids, your parents, someone you really love here for healthcare? And if the answer is not 100% yes, then we have work to do as a leadership team, right? And so, get busy creating that kind of place. And we don't do that, and here's where I was going with that. We don't do that with a hammer. We do that through time and relationships as a leader. We got to get to know our people, build trust, and build collaboration to get there. Michael, this has been a great conversation on the Lead Up podcast. I really appreciate, first of all, your service to the healthcare industry for all these years, but also just the value you added to our listeners today. And I really appreciate you coming on and spending time with me today. Thanks so much for being a part of the Lead Up podcast.